I'll do a very slow start to give people a chance to creep in. Well, listen, thank you very much for coming out. This is the first talk, last day of GDC, which is possibly one of the toughest slots. And I'm really excited because you not only are here, you actually look wide awake and alert, and I'm like, that's amazing. So whatever coffee you had, that it obviously worked. Super excited to give this talk. My name is James. I'm CEO of PlayFab. This is a joint collaboration talk between PlayFab and Hyper Hippo. Hyper Hippo has been running Adventure Capitalist on our platform now for like 6 months now, maybe more than 6 months, and it's been a really, really good collaboration. These guys have been fantastic to work with, super, super fun. And when we thought about doing a talk at GDC, like, well, we could do a boring technical chat about just PlayFab, or we could do this really cool post-mortem, and are you guys into it? And I said, yeah, we'd love to do that with you. So it's myself and Matt, my CTO. From PlayFab. Also, we're co-founders and started this company together. And then this is Kevin from Hyper Hippo, who did a lot of the work to integrate PlayFab into into Adventure Capitalist. So he's really the best person to get up here and share the stage with us. Before we get too deep into the talk, I do have a note. Please turn on your phones. And in fact, please install Adventure Capitalist if it's not already on there. How many people here already have AdCap on their phones? Great. Well, if you didn't raise your hands, install it now. We're going to do this very audacious, high wire act of launching a live sale during the talk. And so, if you have the game installed, you'll have a chance to actually see live what we're doing from your phone when we're up here, and the game manager setting that up. So that'll be kind of cool. So I encourage you to try that. So what is PlayFab? I'm not going to get too deep into it. If you really want the answer, come to our booth on the show floor. But basically, it is a complete back-end solution for operating live games. At least that's the idea. We've got a bunch of different pieces. We've got back-end services like cloud, storage of data and running in-game commerce and leaderboards, and we have a whole lot of stuff. We'll give a deeper dive a little bit later. Something called the Game Manager, which is a kind of user interface for operating your game. A new technology called PlayStream. We're actually launching that live this week, so this is the first week it's been available. Matt's going to talk more about that later in the talk. And then finally, this marketplace of all these other pre-integrated solutions from other companies that we can tap into. I've actually I should be able to show it here. This is actually, a live feed right now from Adventure Capitalist. You can actually see right now people logging in. So if you keep your eyes open, if you install the game, you might even see yourself fly by up there as you're installing the game. And we'll dive a lot deeper into this as we get through the session. But for now, without much more ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, who's going to talk you through about what is. He's going to take you through what is. Just a second here. There we go. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, who's going to take you through what is Adventure Capitalist. All right, Kevin.
Thanks, James. So my name is Kevin Yockey. I'm one of the programmers at Hyper Hippo Productions. At Hyper Hippo, we tend to make a lot of games. Our philosophy is make them very rapidly, see what sticks. So I've been working on a lot of games over there, but none of them have been quite as big as Adventure Capitalist. We launched it, Adventure Capitalist was written by one of our game designers as his first Unity project. We launched it on Kongregate in 2014, where it eventually became the most played game of that year. That success continued on platforms like iOS, Android, and Steam on 2015. It was doing very well for us, but it wasn't without its problems. Problems like spending money to acquire players, but being unable to accurately track how well the campaigns did. And it turns out producers and accountants don't like it when you can't track the money. Problems like optimizing our in-game item prices. Everything in Adventure Capitalist was hard-coded into the binary, so it was kind of risky for us to do price changes to see how well it would affect the economy, because it could take days for a new binary to be approved by the various app stores. And we had problems like taking months to make new content. This graph here shows the total blended revenue for all time on AdCap Mobile. Red is iOS and blue is Android. You can see where we launched the Moon kind of at the beginning there, and there's a nice bump in revenue. And many months later, where we launched Mars and had a nice bump of revenue. There is a direct correlation between new content and revenue increases. So spending months to get some new content out was kind of hurting us. After Mars, you can see all the events that we had launched up to last month. Each of those were taking us a month or less to produce, but still providing an equal or even greater amount of revenue. So there's an obvious benefit for getting new live content out on your app quickly. In order to solve these problems, it became apparent that we needed to have some sort of server-driven solution. So the people would often ask me, why don't we just whip up something quick? And that's kind of how we did things before. My history before Hyper Hippo was working at Disney's Club Penguin as a technical architect of servers. I had a lot of experience writing servers and maintaining services and stuff for Club Penguin, so it was usually just sort of a, yeah, okay, we'll make a new service. But what we realized as time went on is that time spent making backends is time lost on existing games, on working on existing games or making new ones. And as I said at Hyper Hippo, we'd like to make games as quickly as possible. It might be in my wheelhouse to make services, but it's not really in our company's wheelhouse to make services. Plus, I'm very lazy. Maintaining backends can be a lot of work, especially early on. There's lots of servers to configure, monitoring and redundancy to set up, interfaces to make. At the beginning of a new service, there's kind of no end to the amount of work that needs to be done. I'm also very lazy. I couldn't think of a third point, so I just copied and pasted the one from before, but it turned out to be a little serendipitous because I kind of hate recoding the wheel. So if someone else has already done the work for me, I feel really foolish not taking advantage of it. Now, at the time, there were a couple of potential services available to us. So why did we choose PlayFab specifically? Well, they were introduced to us by our publisher Congregate, who was aware of some of the problems we were having and suggested that we investigate PlayFab further as a possible solution, which we did. There were a couple things that we liked about what PlayFab was being able to provide for us, such as having a Unity-ready library. Hyper Hippo is kind of a Unity house, so all of our games are Unity development. And some of the services that we were looking at had lackluster Unity libraries or no Unity libraries at all. Having a library that's built with an understanding of Unity's occasional quirky nature can be a big bonus. They were also feature complete for everything that we needed. Everything that we were interested in doing, we saw the potential to be able to do with the PlayFab services that were available to us. And most importantly for me, they were very lazy ready. There was no servers for me to configure, monitoring to redundancy to set up, or interfaces to make. Because it's their business to keep the servers up and running, I didn't have to worry about being on call 24 hours a day either. So we got into contact with PlayFab. Now, at the time, PlayFab was a pay service, but we were able to negotiate a deal that allowed us to operate at a lower cost than it would have been to run something similar in AWS. Since then, PlayFab has gone free, which makes it more viable for startups to investigate. With the deal in place, we decided it was time to start investigation. These are some of the things that we're going to be discussing, or I'm going to be discussing today with PlayFab. We look at authentication, receipt validation, Steam purchasing, saving player profiles in the cloud for Facebook and Facebook purchasing, live events, player notifications, both internal and external, and server-based item catalog, and hopefully ending with a flash sale. Now, when it comes to authentication, every PlayFab call has some kind of authentication ticket in their headers, so you need to be able to determine who the player is before you can make any additional calls to PlayFab. One of the appealing features of Adventure Capitalist is that you can just run it and play it. There's no authorization required in order to do AdCap, and you don't have to be online in order to play AdCap. We didn't want our users to go through an account creation flow, so we decided to log them into PlayFab transparently using their device ID. This allowed us to do an initial testing on PlayFab with very minimal impact to our users. Here's what a standard authentication call looks like for PlayFab. Almost every PlayFab call consists of a request object that you can see there at the top, a successful result callback, and a failed result callback. It's fairly simple stuff. The PlayFab library is very few thrills, which means that it's very easy to wrap. So if you please indulge me for a moment, I'd like to give a very rushed introduction to reactive extensions. We use reactive extensions very heavily in Adventure Capitalist, and I thought it would be easier for me to give you a quick overview than to rewrite any of my examples. Again, I'm kind of lazy. So if you want to give these a go yourself after the talk, I recommend checking out UniRX, which is a Unity-specific implementation of reactive extensions. It's available for free on GitHub and in the Asset Store. First, we create an action to act as an event stream. All PlayFab events will be published through this stream. You can see the action being created there at the top. I throw a delegate at the end there so that we don't have to do null checks everywhere. And at the bottom, you can see what the old call looked like with the generic PlayFab library and what a new call looks like with the wrapper. We do a request object just like before, but now instead of a callback being called on a successful or failed result, we push a new object onto the event stream. All of our PlayFab events implement an iPlayFab event interface. With reactive extensions, it's publishing and subscribing. What I just showed you was the publishing. What I'm showing you now here is the subscribing. We wrap that action into an observable object. And using from event there is how reactive extensions allows you to do that wrapping. The of type at the bottom of the top part there is saying that it will return only objects that match whatever you subscribe to. Once you have your observable object, it can be subscribed to and filtered in a variety of ways. For example, in the old one, you can see how you would do a normal action subscription and callback. And on the new one, you can see with the event stream, we're looking for anything that is of object type login event, where it was a successful login event. And in that situation, the on-successful login will be called. If other objects or a failed login attempt is fired through the event stream, it won't call that function. And that was a very rushed crash course. Now back to PlayFab. Some tips for authentication. Show your PlayFab ID in the UI somewhere. It helps the support teams assist players with their issues, specifically with venture capitalists. If somebody loses their data because it's corrupted or if they want to switch devices, our support team is able to give them golden badges and otherwise get their progress back up to date based on their PlayFab ID. And at the bottom there, you can see I'm using some reactive properties to keep the PlayFab ID up to date on the UI. PlayFab also has authentication tokens once you log them in, and by default, they expire after 12 hours. Adventure Capitalist is a long-running game, so it's not unusual for it to be running well past that 12-hour period on somebody's device. In order to prevent unexpected token expiration, we forcibly invalidate the token every 6 hours. And I'm using another reactive extension, observable timer here, in order to fire the logout event after a 6-hour period. Elsewhere, there is another observable monitoring is logged in, and it tries to re-authenticate the user every minute while that is logged in property is false. Once we had authentication in place, we were able to start looking at receipt validation. Now, when it comes to receipt validation, we care more about accurate reporting than stopping hackers. Hackers, they're going to hack. And there's very little that you can do to stop a compromised device or binary. Worst case, they're just going to modify the local save data to get what they want, and people willing to go that far are very unlikely to buy something anyways, so we don't try to pay them too much attention. AdCap being a single-player game, they're only ruining their own experience. This is how Adventure Capitalist did receipt validation before PlayFab, the graph on the right-hand side there. We initiate the purchase and hand over control to the device. This is the user going to the gold store, clicking the buy button, at which point we initiate the flow on the device itself. We don't have any control over the flow once the device takes over, but at some point we're going to get a response saying the purchase was successful or the purchase was failed. We would do a local receipt validation on a successful purchase. Yes, it is a receipt. Yes, it contains items that we would sell. Very basic stuff. If that looks good, we would give player their gold, and we would send a report to our publisher for tracking the player's spending habits. The hackers will compromise the App Store part of this. Typically, there are a bunch of ways of doing it, but they compromise the App Store part of it, and they would send us receipts that for all intents and purposes looked valid, but were not actually valid receipts for us. Yes, they were a receipt. Yes, they contained items that we had, but they weren't actually coming from the App Store, so we didn't receive any money. Our game couldn't tell the difference. So it would give the player their gold, and we would send a report to our publisher. Therefore, our reports were not very accurate. This can be a big problem sometimes. The small blue line there at the bottom is the number of valid receipts being processed by PlayFab right now, and the slightly larger red lines are the number of invalid receipts that PlayFab is processing right now. Yes, it's a little bit of a difference, and that was affecting some of our reports. At the time that I saw this, I had assumed that there was a problem with their implementation because I didn't feel like it was realistic for the numbers to be that high. But we now speculate that hackers are just trying to send multiple receipts over and over again in order to bypass the system. Before PlayFab can do receipt validation, we needed to add all of our purchasable items to a catalog in the economy section. You can see here that we have multiple prices for the same item. We duplicate that information in the app stores themselves as well, and this allows us fine-grained control over discounting items and amounts. This is the new flow after implementing PlayFab. It required just a small tweak where now, on a successful purchase event, we forward the receipt to PlayFab for validation instead of doing a local one. PlayFab will do all the checks, including contacting the App Store to see if the receipt is real. And if everything looks good, they tell us it's valid, we grant the gold, and now we send a more accurate report to our publishers. We created a wrapper for the main PlayFab library, and this is a little snippet of it. You can see I'm still using event streams here. We're creating a request object containing the receipt data, and we send that off to PlayFab. On a successful PlayFab receipt validation event, we push a RV event object onto the stream. On the other side, this is a snippet from our Android store class. We use a popular library called Prime31 to initiate the purchase flow and complete the purchase flow on the devices on Android devices. And we wrap the successful purchase events from Prime31 onto our event stream for a little bit of consistency. We send the receipts for any successful purchase completed event to PlayFab for validation. And somewhere else, not shown here, we have an item class listening for RV events that are successful in granting the gold. And somewhere else yet, also not shown here, we have an analytics object listening for RV events and sending statistics to our publisher, helping us ensure that we get accurate reports. Some tips that we learned when doing receipt validation. Everything in Venture Capitalist is a consumable item. If you're familiar with the term, they can be permanent or consumable. Consumable items that aren't consumed on the App Store can't be repurchased. Sometimes internet happens and transactions aren't properly completed, so we suggest you check for unconsumed items either on game startup or periodically before a purchase is beginning so that you can handle them accordingly. If you don't consume them properly, the user can't buy anything and then you get a support ticket. Both Google Play and the App Store allow sandbox transactions. It is easy to set up a PlayFab title ID for testing the sandbox transactions, and by setting up a test ID, you're able to reduce the risk of doing something with your live data or messing up with your live reports. So I suggest you set up a test ID on PlayFab for you to do your purchase testing. When everything is ready to go, it's very easy to copy and paste your catalogs from the test title ID to the real title ID and get you off and running. Unlike mobile devices, Steam purchases require you to initiate and complete the purchase through a server. So on the graph here, just like with mobile, the places buy gold to AdCap, but now AdCap has to send a initiate purchase request to a server, which will send an initiate purchase request to Steam. And that's the point where the Steam overlay will appear and the client will go through their flow. Similar to mobile, at some point we will get a purchase completed or purchase failed response from onto the AdCap client. We will send the purchase completed events to a server, which will send please complete this purchase request to the Steam API, which will say everything is great. So the server can tell the game everything is great, and we can grant the gold and send a report to our publisher. Now, I had already written a service for this before we had partnered up with PlayFab, but it didn't support sales and it had a very programmy interface. So I had to choose between going back and updating that service to add those features or migrating everything over to PlayFab. As you can probably guess, based on the title of this talk, we went with PlayFab. We modified our PlayFab store catalog to include the Steam items available for purchase, and we pointed the game binary to do request to PlayFab instead of my custom service. The flow now just had one small change where we have to start the purchase, sending a start purchase request to PlayFab, getting a transaction ID back, and then doing the initiate purchase call to PlayFab, which will go to Steam, which will bring up the overlay, and so on and so forth. In addition to being able to turn off an AWS service and replacing with PlayFab and saving us a little bit of money, our producers were able to use a system that they were very familiar with in order to control items for sale and sales. This is some of the code for the Steam app purchase flow. This pattern should be looking very familiar to you right now. Because of our event stream system, it was relatively painless to tweak our purchase flows in order to use PlayFab instead of the custom service. This is also another example of where writing a little bit of a wrapper class for PlayFab can be useful, as we can immediately initiate the Play for Purchase flow on a successful start purchase result. A couple things that we learned integrating Steam. It does support sandbox purchases similar to mobile, but it requires the server to send a specific kind of request to say this is a sandbox purchase. PlayFab support team can configure a title ID to be in sandbox mode for Steam, but it changes the entire title ID. So similar to mobile, we recommend creating a test title ID in order to do your Steam test transactions. And again, when you're ready to go, it's easy to migrate all the information over to the live title ID. And I don't know if it's specific to Steam or not, but we discovered that users love to hammer on buttons until they get some kind of result. And because it could take over a second for an overlay to appear from Steam due to the flow from server to server to client to server, they would just keep pounding on the buy gold button until something happened, and then we would get a lot of incomplete transactions in our reports. So please put some kind of indicator on the screen that, yes, we got your first click, you don't need to keep clicking, and block all user input until you get some kind of result from the Steam API. Another platform we wanted to launch on was Facebook. And with the deprecation of the Unity web player plugin, we needed to get the game working with WebGL. This was rife with enough complications to warrant its own talk, but one issue that we encountered that is kind of fitting here was related to player prefs. Unity uses the IndexedDB to store player prefs information, and we found that different browsers had inconsistent results, to put it mildly, with this technology when the game was running in an iframe on the Facebook page. So we decided to move the player data to PlayFab. The standard Facebook library is initialized on our loading screen, and once we receive the Facebook access token, we log the user into PlayFab. Player data is then retrieved and stored into memory and used for the duration of the session in the game. We have a timer that periodically pushes the data back into PlayFab as the game is running. And because user data in PlayFab is a simple key value store, it was very easy for us to map the player pref system we were previously using to PlayFab system. To make purchases on Facebook, you are required to provide an Open Graph product document that contains details about your items. Conveniently, PlayFab can provide an Open Graph product document that contains details about any of the items that are in your item catalogs. And then you just need to point, once you set up the items in the PlayFab catalog, you just need to point the Facebook callback URL to a special PlayFab URL for your title ID, and you're good to go. Moving on to live events. For us, live events are short-lived, bite-sized pieces of content that provide a little spice to your idle game experience. Players love new content, and AdCat players specifically love quick bursts of new content to complement the long tail of regular AdCat gameplay. It also turns out that game designers love live events because they can use it as a testing ground for new game ideas. And if that idea turns out to be popular, we can look at implementing it into the main game. If it turns out to be unpopular, we can either tweak it live or we can drop it after the live event is over in a week and it has very little impact on our player base. To facilitate live events, we needed to add support for asset bundles. For those that don't know, Unity asset bundles allow you to store media content, such as images and music, inside of your main library. They are downloaded later by your app on an as-needed basis and cached. I'm not going to get too detailed about how this works, but Unity does have decent documentation on their site, and they have an asset bundle manager in their asset store that can help get you started. So that covers the media, but what about the data? Game designers find it very easy to work in Google Sheets. There's even another talk at GDC this year about using spreadsheets to store all of your game data, so it might be worth checking out if you haven't done so already. Anyhow, The editor version of the game works directly from Google Sheets, which allows our designers and programmers to quickly test any changes that are being made during the development of the new event. When we're ready for the testing on the devices themselves, we take the sheets, we base64 encode them, and we store them in a PlayFab catalog. Now, PlayFab catalogs were designed for items for selling and stuff like that, stores and sales, but ultimately it's just a container of key value pairs. So we found a way that we could abuse it in order to store live event data. Once they're up on PlayFab, we stick them onto PlayFab in their own catalog. And we have multiple catalogs, one for each event in test mode, one for each event in live mode. This allows us to have multiple events in development at the same time and in various stages of completion. At the beginning, in order to start a live event, we do a request for title data to determine which event catalog to load. We also do a request for read-only user data to see if the event catalog should be overridden for that specific user. So on a per-user basis, we are able to say, instead of using the catalog that's live right now, I want you to use a different catalog. And this allows us to run tests on multiple upcoming events in a live environment. Not shown here, once we receive the title and user data, we request the appropriate event catalog, which contains all the information that we need in order to run an adventure capitalist planet. Once we implemented live events, we saw an immediate increase in revenue on the event launch, and this is sustained typically throughout the entire event. Now, normally there would be a slump in the activity and revenue on the day after the event has been over, but for this particular graph, we decided to try out a flash sale to see how well it would affect the slump. So when the event was completed, the next day we started a sale on some of our items, and we were pleasantly surprised by the results. The flash sale eliminated the slump and helped smooth the transition back to regular gameplay. A few things about live events. The biggest development advantage to hosting your data server-side and using asset bundles is being able to submit your app for approval before all of your content is ready, which can be a big bonus. We actually launch a new binary of the app sometimes weeks before we launch the live event, even if the live event is not completed, because we have control over the asset bundles and are able to update them at any time. As well, getting the approved app out to the public early also helps ensure a higher adoption rate of the new version before your event goes live. We're also able to respond to feedback and analytics more quickly. On one event, our analytics were showing that people were getting through the content too quickly, and we realized it was due to a misconfiguration on our part of core value that managed the pacing in the game. And for those of you familiar with Adventure Capitalists, that was the angel accumulation rate being set too high. We were able to quickly lower the value and that immediately slowed down content consumption, and we saw an increase in sustained engagement and in-app spend. We were able to do that live and see the results within a few hours. Whenever we launch an event or an in-game sale, we like to let our players know about it. This is done via in-game notification and external push notifications. While PlayFab does support push notifications, it's more of a one-on-one type of event and not really designed to handle like a mass bulk send of push notifications. When it became clear that they wouldn't be able to handle it because it wasn't really in their design, they recommended one signal, which was very easy for us to get going on Unity. For internal notifications, we use a PlayFab feature called Title News. This is what the Title News editing screen looks like. You can write your news and leave it unpublished until you're ready to go. We use JSON there in the body. We use JSON wherever we can because it helps future-proof some of the stuff. If we want to add a new feature with Title News, we can just put it in there. New versions of the game will work with it just fine. Old versions will ignore the whatever the new properties are. This isn't a push system, so we need to check for new news periodically while the game is running. And unfortunately, I don't have any good numbers on internal notification engagement because they don't demand any action from the user other than just closing the news event. I do have some numbers, though, on external push notifications. We do get a decent click-through rate for them, and even 5 to 10%, it can add up if your user base is big enough. The first time that we launched a push notification, you can see that we got a gigantic spike in our logins, and shortly followed by a message from PlayFab saying, "Hey, what's going on?" So we let them know that we did a live event, and now we continue to let them know a little bit ahead of time when we're going to be doing a promotion so that they can watch the service and make sure everything continues to run smoothly. As we move more and more things into PlayFab, we're able to play with prices and balance and otherwise tune our economy. Right now, we don't have the ability to add new items with new functionality to the catalog, but if we wanted to add something like a 4 times multiplier to complement our 3 and 12 times multiplier, there's nothing stopping us from doing that. Our producer finds this to be a very powerful tool, as it lets us optimize both revenue and player experience in ways that we weren't able to do before. It also gives us the ability to run flash sales. This revenue chart denotes gross in-app purchase revenue for Steam, iOS, and Android in 24 hours. Each tick represents a 10-minute period. The unnecessary arrow there at the end is pointing to where the sales period started. The sales have the potential for big impact on your app. And the best part about having a sales system is that you're able to do it at any time. And so I'm going to now try to do a live sale. This is what the dashboard looks like for Adventure Capitalist. These are all the live events. Can you see? Yeah, good mouse pointer. These are all the live events happening right now, people logging in. We have it filtering at a sampling of 10 to 1. If I was to set it to 1 to 1, you would see nothing but stuff flowing through the screen. So I'm going to go to the economy here. And you can see these are all our catalogs for events as well. We store them all here along with our store catalog for in-app purchases like gold. And this is our store catalog for in-app purchases like multipliers and suits. One of our catalogs look like this, but I am more interested in the store at the moment. So by modifying the prices in the store, I'm able to modify almost in real time the values that you would be seeing in the game. I say almost in real time because it isn't push. It is read at game startup. So if you have the game open right now, you're not going to be seeing these new values. But if you close and reopen it, you should see them. So we're going to reduce some of these values down for the suits because my friend Cody, who designed Adventure Capitalist, loves wearing suits. And 20. And I save store. And that is now live for anybody that launches the game. And as I mentioned before, whenever we do a sale, we like to let people know about it. And I'm not going to do a push notification, but I am going to do an in-game notification about our suit sale. Just like elsewhere, we use JSON wherever we can. This was written earlier. All I have to do is set it to published and save the title news. Now, this also is not a push notification. The game checks for new news every 30 minutes. So depending on when that 30-minute window is on your particular device, you should eventually see the character we call Louis Fatui pop up and let you know that there is a GDC suit sale. And I believe that is all that I have to talk about today, so I'm going to pass it over.
Yeah, can you come up?
Thank you.
Thanks. Cool. So conveniently enough, my machine blue screened right before this talk, so I'm going to have James help me.
No worries, let's get this up, yeah. Mac, he's a Windows user and I'm a Mac user, so we're kind of, it's a little bit different. Yeah, and by the way, it's actually, I don't know, it's kind of cool. Yeah, and it's because they've already set our system up for Easter, he's actually wearing an Easter Bunny outfit, which is kind of cool, so yeah.
Yep. So you've seen PlayStream in a few different places so far, and I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that because we are releasing it this week, and I'm pretty excited about that. So, PlayStream is basically a stream of events of everything happening in your game. So that includes things like players' stats change, purchasing items, logging in, etc. And you can see that happening over here for another game on our system in real time. And that's cool. It's cool to be able to see the events and even do reports and analyze them and whatnot. But what's really neat about PlayStream is it lets you do something about these events. So let's see what that means. So this is the dashboard of a test game that I created. I'm going to go into the PlayStream tab, into segments, and you can see there's a high skill players segment. So what this segment does is basically whenever a player levels up their XP stat above 100, it triggers an action. And the action for this segment is to grant a sword lightning item. But it could also be other things like send a push notification and a bunch of other ones that we'll be adding shortly. And as a catch-all that basically lets you do anything, execute cloud script. So I'll show that later. All right, so where is the player?
Just go through your player tab, right? Use the other window and just navigate your player.
Right, here we go. Okay, so this is my player. This is the stream. And I'm going to go into the stats tab for this player and change the stat, the XP stat. So this is simulating the stat changing in game. And
You actually save it. You have to put
did I save it?
It works. But I think you actually want 101, right? XP 101?
Oh. Do 105. Hey, there it is. All right, so you see that the stat XP changed from 100 to 105, and they entered the high skill player segment, and it granted them the item. And if I go into that player's inventory, there you see it, 10:37. Is that the right time? All right. So there it is. So let's go back and try one other thing. Scrolling is backwards. All right. Okay, so in addition to granting the item, let's say now I want to change one of their stats. And that's not one of the built-in actions yet, but since we can call into CloudScript, we can write our own function to do that. So as you can see over here, we have the level up player function, which calls into the PlayFab server API to update user stats. So we're going to update the level stat to 2. And this is using our GitHub integration, where I can come in, edit my script. I think I can. There. Okay, now if I come back to servers. Wait, this is wrong. Great. Right, you can see it updated. Okay. So go back to our segment, say execute cloud script, and call the level up player function. Save that. Okay, I'm just going to put this back down to 1. And I should see, if I go to the right.
Wrong game.
Yeah. Changing it again. Okay, cool. So you see that it changed. They entered this segment once again, and it both granted the item and called the function. And if we look at, let's see. This, it actually shows us the raw JSON properties for that event. Cool. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Matt was very excited about giving a live demo of this tool. Yeah, I would much rather be writing code right now than demoing features live, but that was awesome. Thanks. So yeah, so that's basically a whirlwind tour of some features from PlayFab, as well as what it took to integrate with a game like Hyper Hippo and a venture capitalist. We'd love to take you through a much more in-depth demo in our booth if you want to stop by on the show floor. And of course, because PlayFab is free, anyone can come sign up for an account and try this stuff out yourself. The PlayStream stuff, it really is pretty cool. I mean, not only can you start to, we see this as a way of really starting to move games toward automating game operations and starting to really make the whole operations process just a lot more efficient and more effective. Because where it really, really gets sexy is when you start getting these add-ons. And we're just getting started with these. We have about a dozen companies now integrated into the system. And one of my favorite integrations, for example, is Innervate. They do community sites for games. And where this really gets cool is that you can now turn on, any game built on PlayFab can now get a web-based community site with forums and leaderboards and so on through this company Innervate. And because they're tied into PlayFab, when players do things like posting into a forum on their Innervate website, the event of the forum post gets sent back into PlayFab, and we can automatically do actions like Matt just showed you, where you can do actions in-game based on what's happening on your community site. So the fact that someone posts in a forum can increment a forum post counter in your game, which in turn can be used for things like a segment like players who have frequent posters, and you can put them in VIP lists and give them special events and so forth. So the whole system becomes really very powerful, and we're super excited. So with that, I'm actually going to start to wrap it up. We have time for plenty of questions, and to sweeten the pot, we have these sexy PlayFab T-shirts for any of you who have a question to ask. And so we can take them at the microphone if you want to come up and ask any questions.
So you demoed GitHub integration. Is Bitbucket planned or in existence?
Bitbucket? Could you
So the question is Bitbucket integration also planned?
Oh, yeah. So we started with GitHub because that was basically what most of our customers were using, but we plan to extend that to any Git repo and probably other source control systems like Perforce, et cetera.
One of the things that's really cool about our GitHub integrations, today it's only Cloud Script, but we will shortly be adding a full set of configuration management through GitHub. So anything you could possibly change in PlayFab will be serializing out into GitHub, including things like catalog management, title data management, player news, which means GitHub becomes our mechanism for having multiple instances of a title.
Yeah, like basically you can create as many branches as you want in Git, and then that will map to basically test versions of your title. So you can do things like have a dev version and a QA version, and maybe even like a beta release for people that want to try the newest stuff.
Very cool.
Cool. Next question. And don't forget your T-shirt over on the side here.
Yeah, my question is about RX extensions. Do you use RX extensions as a global boss in your game or any other type other than the managing network requests?
We don't use it globally. We have it self-contained, and so like PlayFab has one event stream and stuff like that. And we pass the PlayFab object around whatever might be interested in it so that they can subscribe to or publish stuff to the event stream. In a more overall sense, we do use reactive extensions all over the place in Adventure Capitalist, not just with this, but we have them handling like how progress is working on ventures, when upgrades when unlocks occur, stuff like that. So it's all over the place.
So you use like signaling events to other game objects?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. Does PlayFab suitable with bigger game? I said like I have to query other player, query the leaderboard, or showing the lobby with somebody currently online. Can PlayFab have?
Yes, I think the question is, does PlayFab handle things like querying real-time players and things like leaderboards and other players online? Is that your question?
Yes.
Yeah, so the simple answer is yes, it handles big games. We've actually stress tested it up to 1 million concurrent players, which was around 23,000 transactions per second. So in terms of scale, we've certainly pushed it up to there. Right now, the biggest games we have are running around the multi-million DAU levels. But in terms of features like Like leaderboards, for example, absolutely. You can go in and actually see, here's a game that's live right now. It's a first-person shooter game. And I can actually look at the Players tab and see things like leaders. Any of the stats that we were just showing, any statistic can be used to generate a leaderboard. And so, for example, I could look at the XP stat and see right away, here's a list of players, ranked based on XP. And any leaderboard can be reset or scheduled for reset frequency, which allows you to actually do things like tournaments and events, where every time the leaderboard resets, we take the entire list of it, archive it out, and store it, and then you can then look it up later on at any time to see who was in the leaderboard at the time of the reset. Did that answer your question?
And how about query order player? I would like to, if I want to battle with other player, I can get that player data, like the team, can one client get another player data?
Is the question basically matchmaking, right? So yes, we have a matchmaking API that can use the value of that statistic as the basis of which player it chooses to match you with.
Yeah, for example, this is a multiplayer game. This is actually an Unreal-based multiplayer game. And this is actually a live multiplayer game right now. So you can see this is actually Steam Early Access. And this is a game that's using 7 servers. 26 games are going on right now in real time. And there's 67 players playing in real time. And if you look at the servers tab here, you can actually see the servers that are live. So for example, this is a server with 10 games running out of a total of 15 per server. This is the build that's been uploaded. And for every game, we actually archive off a list of all the games after they're complete. So for example, here's a game match that finished. It had 2 players in survival mode. And I can actually look at one of these players, for example, and from the player, I can see a list of every multiplayer match this player's ever participated in. So here's a player who's done 192 matches, for example. And for any one of these matches, I can actually go off and download the log file from the server. So after the server match is over, we archive all the files, and I can actually bring that up here and show you, for example, this is the debug log live from the Unreal server when the match completed. So this is really, really great for debugging. So if a player says, hey, I was playing a game and the game crashed, something's wrong, you can actually get the player's name, look up the logs, and see every log of every game they've ever played in and see what happened, as well as their social graph of who they've played against.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thanks. Don't get your shirt. Hi, James.
Hey, can you talk about how Adventure Capitalist handles offline play, like caching catalog data and player data?
So for offline stuff, Adventure Capitalist is almost all an offline game except for the live events. When the game launches and we check and see if you're online or offline, if you're offline, you can just play the game as normal. We're not, on mobile devices anyways, we're not storing player data on PlayFab. It's all stored locally in Player Press. Facebook is the only place where we store them online. So on mobile devices, if you're offline, everything works except for the live events. If you try to go to them, it will say you need to be online and have the latest version of the game to play.
Well, when you are online and you download like the catalog data that sets the pricing of things, is that stuff that you
So for
cache?
For prices, we have a default catalog built into the game that has all the original prices. So if you're not online, obviously you can't buy gold, but we allow you, which is for those that don't know, it's our in-app purchasable currency. But if you have gold, there are default prices for all of the stuff within the store. And so if you try to spend your gold, those are the prices that it will use. But when you go online, it will, or when you eventually get online, it will download whatever the latest prices are for those items.
Okay.
And I can add to that. One thing I will say is that for other games we've seen, multiplayer games we've seen, other games we've seen who do want to have more aggressive offline, we actually have players who've submitted to us some caching libraries, and we will surely be rolling out some more aggressive caching libraries as part of our SDKs. Right now our SDK is a pretty minimal pass-through layer, but we're looking at doing more aggressive caching on the phone to do synchronization between local data and server data. But right now that's an exercise left to the developer.
Great, thank you.
Hi, how does PlayFab handles the scaling, user scaling or the backend server scaling? Say, for example, game gets featured and you get 1 million downloads a day, and how does PlayFab handles that? Does it?
How does it handle?
So the skinning?
The scaling.
Yeah. So the basic is this on? Yeah, it was on. Okay. Yeah. So our architecture is designed to be elastic, both in terms of compute and storage. So we're built on AWS almost entirely at this point. All of our processing of API requests is done on EC2 instances that auto-scale based on load. And then all of the primary data store for players is in DynamoDB, which also scales in terms of read and write throughput. So all of that happens automatically, and like for some of the events like Kevin showed where they did a push notification, like that just, it was a fun test, but it did spin up new servers and increase the database throughput in real time.
So all those servers are set up like shard setup, everything is done, like because the sudden scale will cause always the server delays and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so all of the player data is sharded by player ID, and in Dynamo, as long as you have a hash key that is well distributed, it will scale up write throughput, read throughput arbitrarily, basically. So it's a lot of work to get it set up that way, but once you do, it works really well.
So that means there's no upper limit on users. So there's no upper limit.
Like I said, we've tested to tens of millions of players and up to 1 million concurrent players. That's the most we've tested on, but we didn't have to stop there. We could have kept going. We just stopped based on economics. We didn't want to keep going past that for the cost purposes.
Yeah. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, you can notice, I'm just in case you're curious, I mean, even though we didn't do a push notification, you can see the revenue for the recent sale we launched just a few minutes ago is starting to look up.
The results are rolling in.
The results are rolling in, yeah.
Hi. How is it difficult to port a parse backend to PlayFab?
Sure. So we actually launched, funny you ask, we actually launched the parse migration kit specifically for this purpose. We had a lot of, as you can imagine, a lot of game developers came to us looking to migrate off of parse. And at this point, we've probably had about a half dozen to dozen now move on to PlayFab. We are able to import all of the players over, but because it's not a one-to-one mapping, there are a significant number of changes you have to make.
Yeah, I mean, it imports all of the players and their data objects, so it doesn't import everything that you could do in parse, but it imports like the basics.
Okay.
And we do have a parse migration document somewhere. I'm looking for it right now, but it's out there somewhere in the system. So yeah, we do have a whole parse kind of how-to.
I had a look. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so I want to thank you all again for coming today. This has been really, really fun for us to give this session, and hopefully it's fun for you to experience it. Please do stop by our booth. We'd love to hand you detailed materials, and we have almost our entire engineering team is down here at the show, so we can go very deep with you if you want to go look at things like our Lumberyard SDK, our Unity SDK, talk about Unreal, or get other questions answered. All right, thank you very much.